So now the Gemara asks on Daf Ches Omid Beis Chatas Davodas Kochavim. Okay, in the case of a person who worships an idol inadvertently, and he has to bring a special korban chatos of avodas kochavim, and that's a parsha in Bamidbar Perek Tes Vav, and there are unique dinim to that korban. Like, for example, instead of a seir, you bring a soyer. Dishmias hakol ubitis vasayim utumas migdash v'kadashav. Now we have another unique kind of korban chatos, which is called the korban olav yored for any one of those three averos, either because he took a shvua, which must be achirim, that he doesn't have edus and he really have edus, or bitis vasayim, he took a shvua that he wouldn't eat this and he ate that, and tumas migdash, he went into the migdash betuma. These are all variable chatos, meaning a korban olav yored, and they reflect your financial situation. To look sivbahu, and yet the requirement in these karbanos, which are very unique kinds of korban chatos, doesn't say anything about requiring it lishma. Minolan, how do we know that this chatos, like all the other chatos, would be possible if he has in mind the wrong korban? Instead of chatos, he has in mind shlomu. Now, you might argue, well, these, chatos avodas kochavim might be more chamur, because it's not just a chiyuv kares, but it's also chiyuv misa. Talking about a capital crime. So the word immediately says chatos avodas kochavim asi michatos chayv shkei kares kemosa. It's at least as chamur as a korban chatos for chelev, which is a violation of an isa kares, and certainly avodas kochavim is an isa kares. It's even more than an isa kares. For chelev, you can never be chayv capital crime. V'hana kula asir b'me'etzat. And the other chatos, like for example the olav yored, can be derived with a b'meh matzad, b'meh matzidu, or b'meh atzad in the Gemara's language, from the other korbanos chatos. Okay, now we talk about korban pesach. Tana Rabbana. Okay, the laws of korban pesach are a little bit counterintuitive. Pesach bismano. If you brought the korban pesach on the 14th of Nisan, then lishmo kosher, obviously, but shelo lishmo pasul. Now, he didn't get it right because he had in mind a different korban, but he did have at least the zman in mind, meaning he shechted the korban bismano, and it was a korban pesach. But that makes it worse than shelo bismano, b'shar yemos hashana. And I'm going to skip two words for a second. Shelo lishmo kosher. So it's interesting. If on the 14th of Nisan in the afternoon you had a korban pesach in front of you and you shechted it shelo lishma, it's possible. But if the rest of the year you had in front of you a korban pesach and you shechted shelo lishma, it's kosher. And we're going to soon see that it becomes a korban shlomim. But if on the other hand, b'shar yemos hashana, you had in mind lishmo, for the sake of a Pesach, then it's possible. And obviously on the 14th of Nisan, if you had in mind Lishmo, it would be kosher. So everything gets flipped over from one extreme to the other. So Gemara says, yeah.
What makes it a korban pesach the rest of the year?
Yeah, let's say, for example, a week before korban pesach, a week before the 14th of Nisan, I already designated as a korban pesach, like Yotzei Mitzrayim on the 10th of Nisan, 4 days before the korban pesach, they already designated it. Now, exactly how it lasted the whole year round, I guess they brought a different korban in the meantime because they couldn't find the korban pesach, and now they found the korban pesach. So the Gemara now asks me, Nani Mili, what's the source for the halacha that if you bring a korban pesach the whole year round, and you bring it for the sake of a different korban, which makes, as we'll soon see, into a shlomim, then it's kosher? Omar Avud Shmuel, Omar Kra. The imenat son karbano lizevach shlamim lashem. Now, when it says son refers to, let's say, sheep and goats. A number of animals. I guess you translate as a flock, as opposed to behemos, which would be bakar, not son. And now this can't be referring to a Korban Pesach, because a Korban Pesach has to be from a keves, from a lamb, not from tzon, or at least not all of tzon. So what's the Torah talking about over here in the parsha of Korban Pesach? Very strange. So Gemara says, Dover abba min atzon yehei lezevach shlomim. In other words, the Korban Pesach was being brought as instead of a Korban Pesach, some other Korban during the course of the year, and it's chal as shlomim. How do we know it's chal as shlomim? Because the Torah speaks about minatzon, and the only Korban that's brought minatzon is a Korban shlomim. A Pesach is brought min hakvasim, and a chatos is brought min ha'seirim, so that by process of elimination, we're talking about shlomim. So frek the Gemara, okay, let's say you took a Korban Pesach during the whole year round, and now you're going to designate it as a shlomim. Yeah, but what happens if you have in mind a different Korban? Let's say you took a Korban Pesach the whole year round, and you shechted it l'shem chatos l'shem olah. Ema shlomim in midi achrini lo. How do you know that a Korban Pesach could become a Korban shlomim when not only didn't you have the right kavanah of l'shem Pesach because it was kodem zvado, you couldn't have that kavanah, but you didn't even have kavanah l'shem shlomim. Rabbi Elam, Rabbi Yochanan li zevach. Okay, so we go back to the pasuk, and the pasuk says v'im min atzon karbano li zevach. Liz zevach is an extra word in the pasuk, and we use it as a ribui. L'rabos kol zevach. If you had in mind any other korban, then it becomes shlomim, which is called tzon, and dover abba min atzon, which is shlomim. Frek the Gemara, ema kol deshachit lehevi kamosa. Now, what is the Gemara asking now? You know, it says anything that that it was shechted for. Let's say he took a Korban Pesach the whole year round, he shechted for a chatos, maybe it should become a chatos. If he shechted for an olah, maybe it should become an olah. Why do you say it automatically becomes a shlomim? I just want to see if he adds anything here that I forgot. Oh, he says lezevach is an all-inclusive term that refers to all types of korbanos. So if let's say he took a Pesach B'shayim Osashon, he shechted for an olah, then why doesn't it become an olah? So the Gemara is saying, well, if it would have said, you know, l'shlamim u'lezevach, I haviksiv l'shlamim v'zevach kiddush, then I would understand that the word l'zevach after l'shlamim is coming to teach you that it could become an olah. But hashadiksiv l'zevach shlamim, the word l'zevach comes before the word shlamim. It's telling you that whatever you shechted for, because l'zevach is a ribui that includes all the types of korbanos, l'shlamim, it becomes a korban shlamim lehem. Frek the Gemara, emel l'zevach klal. Oh, now we get into klal pradu klal, because we started with the word zevach, correct? And then, which is a klal, and then we had the word shlamim, which is a prat. Is therefore able to zeva klal shlomim prat klal uprat ein beklal elamash befrat shlomim in midi achridi lo. Yeah, but then the question is, so why did the Torah say lezevach? Okay, I don't know. We'll get the answer to that question in a minute. But first, let's clear our brains and say that when it says lezevach, it's a klal. So you can have in mind any other korban, but then it says shlomim, which is a prat, and then we're going to apply the principle of ein b'chlal l'masha b'frat, and the klal is now reduced to the prat. So it means only if he had in mind l'shem shlomim is the korban kosher. Okay, so why did the Torah say l'zevach? And the answer is in the next word in the pasuk. It says, Im min atzon karbano lezevach shlomim lashem. Lashem is a klal, because any korban could be lashem. Hada v'kol. So now we have a principle of klal, prat, uklal. And in the case of klal, prat, uklal, then we say that anything that's similar to the prat is included in the klal. And anything similar to a shlomim, whether it be this korban or that korban, is included. Maske Flora of Rav Yaakov Minarpkod. Oh, we had this already, I think, earlier in the Masechta. Holo Domi Klal Basul Klal Kama. We have a principle that limits our ability to apply the method, the hermeneutic principle of Klal Pratu Klal. And that is that the klal at the end has to reflect the klal at the beginning. There has to be a certain similarity between the two. But here, in this case, klal kama marbi zvachim v'sulo. Kol basul Hashem is kol Hashem afilu liofos afilu menochos. All right, here you have to be a Baki and Kodshim for this, but we'll just give it, a superficial understanding. The Gemara is saying there's a fundamental principle between the klal that opened up this klal, and that was lezevach, which applies to all zvachim, which would therefore include chatos, ola, and shlomim and osham. But then look at the last klal, it's Lashem. Lashem is even a greater klal. It's even a broader generalization. Why? Because it includes even ophos and afilu menachos. So again, what we need to know here, which requires a lot more knowledge, is that Zevach excludes ophos. Now, I think, but again, don't quote me on this, I think it has to do with what's called malika. Like, for example, there's a chatos that comes with an oath, and you don't do shchita on the oath, you do malika. And in the case of menachos, obviously there's no shchita at all. So it can't be called a zevach because zevach means shchita. So now we're in trouble. Because how do we derive a klal pradu klal when the last klal is not similar to the first klal? But Rabbi Shmuel has a much more all-inclusive understanding of klal pradu klal, and he holds that you derive klal pradu klal even if the first klal and the second klal are not matched up together. And klal pradu klal iatadon elikena prat. Okay, so what does that mean? Ma prat mefurshu shelo lishma v'kosher. Right, the Torah says explicitly that if Korban Pesach was shechted the whole year round for the sake of a shlomim, it's kosher, and that's shelo lishma. In other words, it's not for the sake of the Pesach. Af kol shu shelo lishma kosher. The klal is going to tell me that anything that's similar to the prat here is shlomim, and shelo lishma is kosher. So shelo lishma in Korban Pesach, the whole year round, is kosher, and it becomes a shlom. But one second, the Torah does have a prat over here. Ima prat meforish dover abba b'neder and adava af kol abba b'neder adava olu shlomim im chatos v'yasham lo. You can have a voluntary korban ola, voluntary korban shlomim, but you cannot have a voluntary korban chatos or korban asham. I mean, you can't volunteer to eat a chelev. You know what I'm saying? That would be mesid and not shogeg. So therefore, maybe if the prat here is shlomim, it's got to be similar to shlomim, that it's ba b'nei d'dava. And chatos v'yoshim does not qualify because it's not ba b'nei d'dava. Ella, we have to say lezevach ribuyehu. That when the Torah says lezevach, that was the opening klal, it was a ribui, which includes all types of korbanos, including chatos v'yoshim. But Emel Lechol de Shochet Lehevi Kavase. Once again, we come back to our old question. Maybe if you shechted the Korban Pesach during the Gans Yar for the sake of Chatos, maybe it should become a Korban Chatos. Rabbi Ovin Dochin Kodshim Anecholim Eitzel Kodshim Anecholim. If you ain't Dochin Kodshim Anecholim Eitzel Kodshim Shein Anecholim. There's got to be a striking similarity between the Korban Pesach and the Korban for which you are intending to bring that Korban Pesach. It's got to be a Nechal, and therefore we can include Shlomim, because Shlomim, like the Korban Pesach, is a Nechal. but not kodshim she'enim necholim. Now that makes sense for an ola, but we're talking about a chatos and an osham, Rabbosai. Chatos and an osham are necholim, admittedly lizichrei kuhuna. So that's what the Gemara is going to say. Otu chatos yoshim lo misakle ela dochim kodshim enecham lechol adam. Eitzel kodshim she'enim necholim ela le zichrei kuhuna. V'yein dochim kodshim enecham lechol adam. Eitzel kodshim she'enim necham lechol adam, because chatos v'yoshim can only be eaten by Zichrei Kahuna. Okay, then, so we made it in time. So,
Wow.
let me wish you a good Gebench Diar, Shana Tova.
Yeah, go Gebench here, you too.